twins, right?
Yes.
What about Betty?
Yes.
Sometimes we just need a little nudge, right? Got that. Super. I am so grateful to be here. I love this engagement, project, game, whatever it is that we're all doing together. It's awesome. I'm going to explain it to you because I don't know. I think a lot of you know it, but we are in a battle of our lives sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes individually, a battle for our souls. And communities go through difficult times, and when we find ourselves in a situation we're not navigating it to the best, there can be emotional and spiritual fallout and so forth. And so, but I'll tell you, here's this true story how I kind of got to where I am today. It was 2000, April the 9th, 2000, I was appointed an elder. I was young, 40 at the time. That tells you a lot about how I am now. And so immediately, big things that I had never been trained for, never seen in my life, and I'm going to tell you one of them, you'll say, no, I don't believe you, came my way. Okay? So, and this is a story you'll probably never hear again. This is so unusual. But it was a wake-up call. We literally had a ministry of about 500 people, and a hypnotist had grabbed hold of about 27 members of our congregation. And they were paying him a lot of money to get hypnotized to fix the kind of things that only Jesus can fix.
Really?
So we were having, the devil had moved to town sort of thing.
Yeah.
And this guy was charismatic, had a following, a web presence, and a lot of money was going that direction. Then people would miss church to go a weekend workshop, but they'd have church service there, so they didn't lose any time. And then I started to see videos of these people on stages getting hypnotized to overcome addictions or become successful or health conditions or whatever. And none of these promises ever came true. And it kept going and going. And I'm like, what do I do?
Wow, yeah.
What scriptures? What processes? We had nothing for it. Now, the scriptures I had, which is how to sniff out heresy and all that, you know, but we didn't, it was not anything we ever expected. And so I anteed up, I manned up, and I just talked to this hypnotist who would claim that he could put you under and rewire your brain because you were failing because of wrong thinking. He would impart proper thinking and so forth. So I started confronting the people that were profiting off of it as well. And I made some enemies. And then a couple of years later, our church had a firestorm. And many of the people that were upset with me for kind of confronting this scam were in the audience and, you know, raising their voices at me, and it was just an intense, painful moment. 4 years later, this hypnotist was arrested, and he's in prison today for, I think, 16 accounts of molesting young girls. And when I looked at all the stuff that was on his websites later, I realized the evidence trail was already there. So I kept a good record of this story, and I became ever since a problem solver. Okay, and I keep really good records, and I learn, and I make sure other people learn from things.
Yeah.
And so this just kind of became who I am. And then through a sequence of events, I went back to school. I have a master's in theology, master's in conflict management, risk management training as well. And I just want to help my brothers and sisters through my little tiny niche. It's not the greatest thing in the world. It's just valuable when it's valuable.
Yeah.
And to play my part in making the kingdom safer, healthier, more just. There are other gifts that are just incredibly valuable. I'm not the kind of person who will get up and move thousands at a conference. I'm not the one who can develop world strategy and missions. Wasn't the best pastor. I was an elder for exactly 5 years. There were better elders than me around. But there's just one thing I want to do to help people, and that's to navigate through difficulty in a just, fair, and righteous way. And thank you for allowing me to do a project which we'll explain a little bit more here.
That's great.
So this sermon is called Consider Carefully What You Do. It reminds me of the statement from Paul in the New Testament What did he say in 1 Corinthians? Be careful how you build.
Right.
Some things require greater care. Now the story that we're going to look at today is a bit of an overlooked story. The only time I think I've ever heard it preached was by Marty Fuqua back in DeKalb in about 1982. It tells you how long I've been around, okay? But it's a great story. It stayed with me ever since. One of the things I try to do is I wanted to help churches know what options are available to get through difficulty, even just transition change. This story has stuck out for me about one of the ingredients. So, in 852 BC, Jehoshaphat was a good king. The story behind the story that I'm going to read is David was king of Israel, Solomon took over the kingdom, and his son was a bad king. You remember his name? Rehoboam. The kingdom split. The bigger group kept the name Israel, but they weren't very Israel. They'd start worshiping Baal, became all mixed up with other religions, and they met in Samaria. The smaller kingdom was Judah, and that was further south. That's where Jerusalem is the headquarters. Israel never had a good king after that. Judah had, I think, 17, and 7 or 8 of them were good. Jehoshaphat was one of the early good ones. He was so good that he had success around him. He got rid of the idolatry, what we call Asherah poles, places of worship of Asherah, the wife of Baal in the god realm. And he did other things, and people feared him in a healthy way. They respected Jehoshaphat. Ahab was the king of Israel at the time. The scriptures say there was no other king like him. In other words, he was the most despicable, as the Old Testament says. He was the worst king ever. And he was married to a woman named Jezebel. How many of you know somebody named Jezebel? Really? You do? 2 people know somebody? Okay. Wow. Seriously, they're going to need some counseling. Jezebel was so awful. Elijah predicted this horrific death because of the bloodshed she caused.
Wow.
And she's an icon in the book of Revelations for everything wrong. So pray for their friends. Okay? Okay, so now Ahab, as we're going to see in 2 Chronicles 18, you just listen to me, I'm going to read 5 verses. Now Jehoshaphat had great wealth and honor, and he allied himself with Ahab by marriage. First mistake. Marry in to bad religion. It always pulls you down. Never works to marry on the wrong side of the yoke, right?
Yep.
Some years later, he went down to visit Ahab in Samaria. Ahab slaughtered many sheep and cattle for him and the people with him, and urged him to join in a war against Ramoth-Gilead. And Jehoshaphat said, well, I am as you are, and my people are your people. We will join you in the war. And then Jehoshaphat says, but I'll go get some advice from a prophet. But this prophet and Ahab never got along, because Ahab was so awful. And so the advice became very confusing, and they ended up going to a war. So the second mistake that Jehoshaphat made is he allied himself with a bad king. Now he's related to by marriage in a war that wasn't advisable by prophet. Really good guy, majorly messy up. The next thing that happened is Ahab says, hey Jehoshaphat, I got a really great idea. How about you go out there dressed as a king, and I'll be in disguise out there, and they won't even know where I'm at, because I'll be just dressed like a warrior. Well, I mean, that's pretty stupid.
Right.
That's like the target right on Jehoshaphat. So Jehoshaphat gets approached by the enemies, and he does this thing, something like this. It's not me, I'm not Ahab. And he, starts to strip off his robes and stuff, And then he evaded death right then and there.
Wow.
But Ahab, who thought he was so smart, was way far in the back, and somebody flung an arrow, and by the providence of God, he got the arrow straight through him and died by the end of that day. So God's still in control.
Amen.
And Jehoshaphat made it by the skin of his teeth, and now we find out what somebody in his life says to him. When Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, returned safely to his palace in Jerusalem, Jehu the seer, like a prophet, the son of Hanani, went out to meet him and said to the king, "Should you help the wicked and love those who hate the Lord? Because of this, the wrath of the Lord is on you. There is, however, some good in you, for you have rid the land of the Asherah poles and have set your heart on seeking God." Both were true. Okay. Well, Jehoshaphat lived in Jerusalem, and he went out again among the people from Beersheba to the hill country of Ephraim and turned them back to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. He appointed judges in the land in each of the fortified cities of Judah. He told them, "Consider carefully what you do, because you are not judging for mere mortals, but for the Lord, who is with you whenever you give a verdict. Now let the fear of the Lord be on you. Judge carefully, for with the Lord your God there is no injustice or partiality or bribery." In Jerusalem also, Jehoshaphat appointed some of the Levites, priests and heads of the Israelite families, to administer the law of the Lord and to settle disputes. When they lived in Jerusalem, he gave them these orders: "You must serve faithfully and wholeheartedly in the fear of the Lord. In every case that comes before you from your people who live in the cities, whether bloodshed or the concern for the law, commands, decrees, or regulations, you are to warn them not to sin against the Lord, otherwise his wrath will come upon you and your people. Do this and you will not sin. Amariah, the chief priest, will be over you in any matter concerning the Lord. And Zebediah, son of Ishmael, the leader of the tribe of Judah, will be over you in any matter concerning the king." In other words, considering him. "And the Levites will serve as officials before you. Act with courage, and may the Lord be with those who do well." Now, how did he go from realizing he made a mistake of yoking with bad people, a bad nation, to setting up this justice system that even holds his household accountable above him? So he has to report to people. Footnote: of all the 7 or 8 good kings of Judah, all of them had a prophet in their life that we could name. All the ones who didn't do good, we don't have a prophet in their life that we could name or that they even listened to.
Wow. All right.
So get people in your life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Have a handful, just say it, right?
Come on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So how did he go from one place to the other? Well, it started back then. Here in Exodus chapter 18, Jethro says to Moses, "Man, you're so burdened. You're not getting a good night's sleep. You're all bloated. You look sick." I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And here's what you should do. You should set up a system based on levels of competence. Here's the criteria for who should be dispute handlers. The toughest cases come to you. Well, we find out in Deuteronomy chapter 1 that Moses not only did that, he expanded upon it and created the earth's best ancient justice system, bar none, that got plagiarized by everybody since then, including countries like ours. Really set the foundation for Judeo-Christian Western nations, including what are the criteria for the handlers and what is the end game, how to have witnesses and confirm testimonies and yada, yada, yada. That's what he set up. So what Jehoshaphat did is he took a page basically out of Deuteronomy and expanded it for the situation. So what he was saying is, we're going to be a people of principle, of process, and impartial governance. And I'm telling you, this is my experience doing what I do. I was 9 years in engineering, 25 years in ministry, 5 years of consulting. When you have the best processes and principles and right people in place for governance that are impartial, there's almost nothing you can do to hurt that institution. Matter of fact, it's possible that when things come against that institution and they get damaged by it, they'll be stronger shortly after than they ever were before. It's called becoming a learning organization. And that's what I'm hoping that we can enhance with not only the Metro LA ministry, but the overall church. So there were some difficulties in the Metro LA ministry, actually for a long time, depending on which group you were in or which sector or whatever, but they became much more apparent about 2 years ago. And even kind of got to a real pressure cooker in the spring. And Raphael Lua, Ron Quint, Steve Marici, Peter Garcia, and Jerry Sugarman formed a task force to help out the larger Metro LA ministry. Awesome brothers, by the way.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what's been coasting along. They've invited me, and in many shape and forms, I've been partners with the LA Church or individuals in that group, and we have history. So it's kind of an honorable thing to me. So what we're going to do now is talk about where we are. I did an assessment. I interviewed a bunch of people. I'll talk about that in a second. And that assessment will be in your inboxes this week, in terms of the document. To say it's 15 pages, I don't remember exactly. And we are here learning a screen version of the assessment. So this is kind of like the Reader's Digest version right now, okay? And then I am providing recommendations. The one that you will get in your inbox is stage 1 level of recommendations with the assessment. We'll be working on a stage 2, we meaning the task force and me, it's us together. And then in December, I'm going to make a proposal for the LA Church for the long view of how we can learn from this and be very preemptive and preventative in the future. And so, and then what for you to do is to be very reflective. Next Sunday, we meet as a whole region in Long Beach, and we're going to have, it'll be a day unlike you've ever seen before, I guess.
Right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to turn a corner together. Let's say you have no idea why I'm here or any of this stuff. It should still be memorable. If you were part of some of the things that have been painful, this will be memorable. We believe we're doing something that's really right, transparent, noble, and holy. And then there's a there. Hey, I don't know what the there will look like, but when you have the right people, the right principles, transparency, accountability, cross-accountability, and you're looking at things so that you can leverage and learn from them, own them, report back a message to the community, you can't help but have a better there than you have here. Okay? And so I was really encouraged to hear about we have family here. Okay? Okay, well, let's preserve the family. And let's invest in the family, you know, so that more and more people can benefit from it. So I interviewed 110 people. There'll be 22 in April, 88 in September. Some of you from here I recognize. I surveyed 150. I think there's about a 30% overlap electronic survey that went out. And I interviewed former ministers and peers from other churches. I coordinated with the task force, and I had investigated a former ministry leader that had a prominent influence in the region for the purposes of figuring out how we can do better. There were some behavioral accountability balls dropped, and I've reported on these, but we want to look back at what's happened in some cases so we can be better in the future. I asked questions in interviews based like a legacy issue. The legacy thing would be something like, is there something in the past, because it never got sorted out, has an impact on the present? Okay. Health-related question. Is there anything going on right now that's affecting the wellness and the health of the region and so forth? Future leadership. How would you like to see the Metro LA structured, organized, the who, how, why, and what? Just organic conversation, free-flowing, congregational confidence. If there were something serious, like a teen camp, a child dies, and you're pulling the whole congregation together, or something more morally serious with a leader or something, who would you want standing at this microphone, walking the church through it, walking your sector or your region through it? Obviously, there's some people that will automatically be made on that list, but it was a way for me to figure out who are a variety of people that are really trusted.
Right.
And that's good for you to know through this process, because those people become resources from a shepherding standpoint, not just your solo elder that you have, but others along the way. Leadership optimization. I talk about the SS Metro LA ship. It's got a long journey. It's going to take a long time to get there to a faraway distance. It's going to portage. It's going to hit high seas, crazy winds. Times are calm, but at the end, it's going to only reach its destination with the most people safely intact if you have the right people on the right seat of the ship. And so I ask questions like, is there anybody overutilized, underutilized, or are better at this, and we should switch around? Doesn't mean I have any authority to do that. It just means if I'm hearing reoccurring themes, we might want to make some adjustments to the staff, you know. Then a survey. This was more leverages positive questions. When were you most alive and why? And that kind of captures those memories where you go, oh, when we used to do this, it was fantastic. In my Bible talk back in 1997, we were just so growing and so happy. And here's what we did. We met together 3 times a week, that kind of stuff. I was getting things. Weaknesses to leave in the past. What things were part of the past that you did not like, that you want to hold a funeral for to make sure it never comes back?
Right.
You know. And typically those were reoccurring in our shared history of our church was pretty intense levels of accountability, do this, where's your contribution, things like that were a bit over the top or way over the top. Past strengths to recover. Man, the LA church has so many past strengths to look at to recover. 1989 planted, grew to a very large size. You're somewhere around 5,500 members. You planted the church in Moscow, which planted a bunch of churches over there in Eastern Europe. Very significant success story. It was just one of a number of churches that you guys planted. You grew like crazy. I remember a story that I heard when I was consulting in another ministry in 2014. The brother told me this. He goes, Steve, this is how a lot of disciples think. So here's the story. And this is basically a parable / story. In around 1600 some, London had a major fire. Burned down, I believe, 30% of all structures. And Christopher Wren, a famous architect, was asked to be one of the major architects. And he's walking along a road and he sees a guy doing some things with his hands and he knows what he's doing, but he's asking him anyways, and what are you doing? He goes, I'm making a brick. Goes a little bit further down the pathway and he says to the guy doing the exact same job, he says, what are you doing? He goes, I'm building a wall. And so he goes a little bit further down and there's a guy doing the exact same thing, but he has a gleam in his eyes and he's humming and bouncing the step. He says, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a cathedral. And that was St. Paul's Cathedral, which I've been in about 5 times. Beautiful building. What you think you are participating in, constructing, and giving and sacrificing for will affect how resilient you are with change and transition and sacrifices and disruption. And so one of the things we have to figure out as a family of churches, the Los Angeles church back home for me in Chicago, is recapture a vision. Does not the world right now need Jesus?
Yeah.
Man, I cannot turn on the TV. It's awful.
Yeah.
There's such hopelessness in the leadership of our world across all the aisles. It's not inspirational. I'm not saying that, pontificating it. That's what I hear from disciples of all political orientations. That Jesus is the answer.
Yeah.
We can do better. The world needs what we discovered. Sometimes we forget what we discovered. We put our light under a bushel.
Yeah.
Sometimes we put it in the closet, then we lock the closet and sell the house and move away. I mean, there's some things we do. We forget how great of this thing that we discovered. And so, let's think about that. So, what you wish for the future is all connected to that. The most important topic to explore will be another question. Many of the survey responses will be in this document that you'll receive. And I created a one-page exercise of what a small group could do to process the report. Hopefully to kindle some dreams.
Yep.
And think, here's what we could do. And I live in the downtown area of Chicago, like in Lincoln Park, 2 miles north of the Magnificent Mile, right by the zoo, right by the lake. A cool place. This is a cool place. This part of LA is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the heartbeat, and so there's so many things that you can do, but it does take some time to step back and say, wow, what can be done? What is your cathedral? Okay, so what I do is I probe significant problems, I read documents, policies, look at culture, relationships to mediate. We identified 3 relationships that are already well into mediation and doing very good. Topics to sort out, clearing up rumors, wrong reputation. You know, the rumor weed, do you ever see that VeggieTale rumor weed episode?
Yeah.
That's so good if you haven't. It's for kids, but it's for adults.
Oh, okay.
It's like Flintstones. It was really written for adults, you know. And so it's got a great message. We got to kill the rumor weeds, not participate in hearsay.
Yeah.
It does more harm than good. And so now I'm going to hit some of the positives. Okay, this is what came out of the interviews. That this is a very persevering ministry that has endured a lot of things, a ton of changes, more than the average bear. Okay, you've had a lot more transitions and challenges than I would say a typical ministry, and yet you can feel the character. I can perceive the character when I meet with people. Strong relationships. You know, sometimes when we leaders, and I've been in leader capacity many times, mess up, the church just still does fine in some respects, because it was not built on Steve. And so people form their own relationships out of their own convictions and are open with their lives with people that can help them, and that's good. That's the way we need to build church, so that when the humanity of leadership reveals itself, the church is going to be fine.
Yeah.
You have balanced doctrinal soundness and fresh and progressive thinking. I have a sort of a funny story. Last year I was consulting for a church, and they had 26 leaders, 25 of which are really progressive, outside the box, trying new things all the time, put a lot of money into technology and all this kind of stuff. And they're just really trying to reach out, be relatable, all that kind of stuff. Kind of neat. Then you had another group, about that same size, maybe a little larger, that were conservatives. Well, why don't we do what we did in the past? But the leadership group was like, what got us here won't get us there, you know. So they had their like little wars, a polarity thing going on. But then there was this big group in the middle, and they were like, we don't want to be in either group. We want to be hybrids. We want a piece of this and a piece of that. And so the leadership of this church was very humble and responsive. So I put a graphic that showed the polarity system that they had. And I challenged the church leaders right then and there. They were sitting about that far away from me. I said, I suggest you import some conservatives into your leadership group. You mix it up so it represents the whole body, and you become a both-and church. Be progressive, be conservative at the same time. And the cool thing about this church, I did not know. I knew they were videoing it. They were live streaming it.
Oh my God.
So I sit down about 10 minutes after those comments, and I get a text from my daughter Tamara. Great job, Dad. So the church in LA is transparent. It wants to be a model of navigating challenges and difficulties. But I think in the Metro LA, there is a good balance. It is a source of some of the tension in some of the other sectors, but I think we're going to get around it really good. And then you have approachable leaders. Everybody's been approachable by me without even hesitation, but the members of each sector feels like their leader is approachable. And of course, I've known Doug and Joanne since 1999, and that's just Doug, right? Okay, that's Doug and Joanne.
Yeah.
But it's refreshing to hear that that's just not my perspective. It's a collective perspective. Okay, interesting, the survey produced the same results. Anything over 35% is good because people only tend to pick 3 things. So you have doctrinal soundness, one another relationships, and fresh and progressive thinking. So independent confirmation. Areas for concern. And by the way, this screen may or may not have any bearing on your experience here in the downtown. Or it may be a little bit, or it may be things that you're aware of in other sectors. Just let it hit you. Just, kind of sort it out. Disunity within the leadership. That's mostly across parts of Metro LA. Pockets of cliques and discord where people gather around the perspective and the person that they're closer to or believe. There's a one faith approach that's more particular to one ministry and a little bit particular to some other ministries. This is kind of a methodology. If you don't know what it is, that's fine. But even though it has very many favorable attributes, it seems to me it really does, the way it's been managed has been a source of tension. And some relationships are too close to be impartial and sufficiently helpful. I went to a ministry about 4 years ago, and 20 some members left that ministry in a strong sense of emotion. They invited me in 9 months before I could get involved. At 9 months in, we want Steve Staten in. 6 months later, we're not sure we want Steve. I get there at the 9th month, is why is Steve here? And they were locked in unison. It's 24 people. And they were, and what happens I notice is, I've noticed this all the way back to when I was a young Christian, I saw my first division in the church, is that people get in lockstep and they get fused together emotionally. And they adopt one another's perspectives. The way that you know you're healthy when there's tension in a church is that not everybody thinks alike. Thinking alike is overrated. The Bible wants us to be one heart and one mind. The Greek word behind that is homothumadon. And it shows up about 7 times in the book of Acts as a positive thing, about 8 times in the book of Acts negative, like if there's a mob action. You know, that's like we're unified but in the wrong way, you know. But homothumadon could best to be described in commentators where it's like an orchestra, everybody's playing different instruments, but they're playing together in their right place at the right time for great achievement. And one of the places that is used is in Acts chapter 2, verse 1, where the disciples were all together in one place and the Holy Spirit came on them. And you could see what happened out of that chapter is homothumadon, this heart and mind thing. But it isn't needing to think alike on opinionated areas. You know, we are different. We're born in different places, different genders, different ages. And what I like is living in a world of both and versus either or. And I think that's what the Bible's about. So, there's some general recommendations that I put in every packet. Those are just for long view for churches. Okay, so implementation stage 1 that we're in right now. Sorry for the little alignment issues. I don't know why that happened, but risk management. I met with the LA leadership a couple of weeks ago and took a lot of findings that I had. Not only did I interview all these people, I called up former members and ministers with clearance of the LA church to make sure I had a good picture on some things that had happened. And I proposed a way for handling, a conceptual way for handling things in the future so we'll never have the kind of stuff we've had happen in the past again. So that we can bounce back and learn from what has happened. And the congregational report, which you'll get, and a workshop which happened yesterday. Now, there were communication problems and other events. It was called A Fighting Chance, Investing in Your Personal and Professional Relationships. You will, I believe, be given the slides and the workbook from that workshop. It was videotaped, so you'll be able to have access to it. Matter of fact, even the original PowerPoint or keynote, you guys can have access to it to use it yourself. I developed it 5 years ago, and I've probably done it about 25 times. My goal, personal, okay, this is selfish Steve ambition here, okay?
Yeah, sure.
My goal is to create a wave of conflict competence and have that become the reputation of our churches throughout the next generation.
Amen.
One of the most divided church groups in recent history was the Mennonites. And they were persecuted because they wouldn't join World War I, they wouldn't fight for the Allies, and they were going to get in trouble again in World War II for it, because they were conscientious objectors. But they were also struggling with infighting as a religious movement. And when they realized the world doesn't like us, and we don't like each other, we've got some things to figure out. And they went through a process that I don't fully understand, but what they decided to do is to become peacemakers. And many of the best certifications and master's degrees in this nation are found in Mennonite universities, peacemaking and mediation and conflict management. And so I thought, what a great legacy that they're leaving to their future. Why can't that be us? Disciples.
Yes.
So blessed are the peacemakers. That can be us. So all the stuff that I have will be available. I also have a certification course that I do, 15 hours in becoming a mediator and so forth. We can talk about that in the future. We have 3 staff mediations that we've been doing. One's done, one's pretty much wrapping up, and one will be done by the end of the week. The staff, I want to commend your staff to you, including the ones that are not here from other sectors. We assign reading, an evaluation, self-reflective exercise, and something they would have to write and bring into the mediations to really cause them to do pre-work with the staff. It has paid off. Everybody down to the person has been digging in and trying to figure out what were the underlying things that led them to their disunity. And the task force and myself, we were working together on this. And not optimistic in a worldly way, but spiritually, faithfully convinced that we're going to turn the corner on that and God himself will bless us. And then next Sunday, we're calling this a meeting of atonement. Atonement literally means at one, coming at one, relationally. And so I'm going to speak. Peter Garcia and Jerry Sugarman are going to speak. Jerry's an elder in the north. The mediated parties will speak. And then we're going to have a covenant. Man, that's hard to read. That's like...
Sorry.
That's funny. I want to tell you why this last covenant concept is important. And I'm almost done if you're worried.
No.
In 2005, my wife and I were asked to go lead the downtown ministry. We said, sure. They said, well, the staff hasn't been getting along. They haven't even met together for 6 months. And we looked at the staff, we're like, oh, we know who these people are. We love these guys. They're our friends. We can do it. So we went downtown, and wow, did we have... This was a Stephen King thriller. Okay? It was rough. I see why they couldn't meet. But we met anyway. And we had staff quitting. We had feudal groups in the region. Like people that were in corners. They would sit with each other at church. They would kind of scorn at other members. This was really bad.
Wow.
We discovered we had 23 unresolved conflicts. And we had secrets that went way back that nobody knew in the upper level leadership of Chicago that were kind of buried. And so I called up former members, former ministers. I did small town halls to kind of get a narrative, built a narrative, let's say 4 or 5 pages long, this is what happened. Tested it on some of the most sensitive people, how are we doing here? This took about a year, by the way. And by the time we got ready to deal with it publicly, our group of 440 with like 9 staff was Trisha and me with a campus couple to do 30 or 40 and a part-time person. And then Trish and I had the rest. So I delivered the story of what went wrong and described the ownership, as I believe, all the way up to the top of the level of Chicago leadership, including the time where I had been an elder. I said, here's what we do wrong. I even said, here's what us white leaders did. And we hit some of the racial pieces of it. And then we said, we're going to break a leg today. Sometimes a badly set leg, as you know, Doug, right? You have, if it's not been set right, you have to set it again, but you have to break it.
Yeah.
And so I said, I guarantee those of you that were glad that Trish and I moved in a year ago, some of you are going to be really mad at us today. Then a month from now, if you hang on, you're going to be very grateful. But be ready to be mad at us. I'm going to tell a story. So I did all that, and I said, in order for us to move on as a community, we have to all commit to Matthew 5 and Matthew 18. Matthew 5 says, if somebody feels something bad about me, I should go to them. If I feel something bad about them, I should go to them. So we're doubly covered. So if I commit to that, and they commit to that, the church is a lot healthier. But I said, guess what? The reason I'm going to need you to commit to it in a covenant, you committed to it in baptism, but we haven't been doing it. Wow. So we have to recommit in order to move on with this church. If you don't want to do that, we're not going to say that you fell away, but we're just going to say our family here are those who are committing to passages like that, including getting the other side of the story in Proverbs 18:17, and settling matters quickly and all that. And so let us know. You can let us know with a phone call, an email, a handshake, a letter, a hug. Say, We're committed. That's all I need to know. But those of you that don't do any of that, I'm going to assume. Because I need you to communicate.
Amen. Yeah.
We lost 70 people that did not commit. However, the ending's better than that. Okay?
Yeah.
We lost 70 at the moment. But then we had our 23 unresolved conflicts. Now there's only 3 because 20 went with the 70. Then when they left, our attendance did not go down and our contribution did not go down. So we had kind of fleeced out some of the difficulties. Over the course of the next 2 years, 30 of the 70 came back.
Wow, amen.
But we never made them feel like they're lost or they're damned or they're not part of the extended family. We just said, we're here. Just come back in and say, I affirm the covenant, I'm back. So then we had the 3. What do you do with the 3 unresolved conflicts? We had already set up a group of 9 people that had training in mediation, either human resources or some form of fashion. And we fed the 3 conflicts into the team where the disputants would grab 3 people they both agreed on out of it. And all of a sudden we have 0 unresolved conflicts. Now here's the good news. In the last 12 years, we've only had to use the mediation team twice. That's an urban ministry that is really unified. We have our problems, we don't have that problem anymore.
Amen.
It is tight. It is really, really good. But one of the coolest things is one of these number 2 guy on staff who leads the half of the ministry on the south side is one of the people that left. When he came back so strong. We were like, what happened to you? And he was hired. His name was Michael London and his wife Terry. And so, your story's not that story, but there are some parallels, especially in some of the other sectors. And we've got to work together to be really tight, solve problems righteously, and follow the scriptures that Jesus gives to us. Do you agree with that?
Amen.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because I was prepared to run down the aisle, just in case.
We're listening, bro.
Okay, so this is the end of the sermon here, but I want to tell you the next chapter with Jehoshaphat. His story continued. 3 nations allied to fight Judah. Well, Jehoshaphat prayed. They could come from 2 directions. He prayed. And the Lord confused these enemies, and they devoured one another. And I thought, well, man, I think it'd be good to look at the prayer that he prayed. Lord, the God of our ancestors, are you not the God who's in heaven? You rule over the kingdoms of the nations. Power and might are in your hands, and no one can withstand you. If calamity comes upon us, whether the sword or judgment or plague or famine, we will stand in your presence before this temple that bears your name, and will cry out to you in our distress, and you will hear us and save us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. One of the best ways to ensure a great destiny is have our eyes on him, not our eyes on each other. We'll let each other down. You know, nobody's that worthy to have said, man, I have this awesome leader. I'm just going to do whatever he says or whatever. That's a setup for failure. You know, have our eyes on the Lord. Obey his practices in problem solving and dispute resolution and settle matters quickly and don't listen to rumors and be committed to one another and have each other's back and be very serious about it when somebody whispers in your ear and say, nope, bro. Don't tell me if you do, I have to get the other side of the story. No. You know, and we've got to be serious about it. And when you're serious about it for a period of time, your muscle memory goes away. So if you're not serious about it, you'll go back into previous patterns. Now, that may not be anything that you're struggling with here, or you personally, but the principle's there. So sometimes when you get serious about something, you have to focus on it for a long enough stretch, even do mock examples of conversations, how to resolve problems, and study books and pray and think. But then what happens is you can become a new people. I am a living example, or my ministry is back home, that this works. I look forward not only to next Sunday when we bring closure to stage 1 and bring it out in the open. We're going to have a communion service at first with worship, and then free people to leave, guests and so forth. We're going to have a family talk. We're going to close that particular chapter But the upcoming chapters, I want to watch closely, whether I'm here on a trip or from Chicago, because I really believe we're on the right track. We're following God's word. So I want to thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Amen.